Welcome to Rges Algebra 1, Lesson 13A. We're going to be talking about solving equations that have squares in them. Okay, now the key idea here would be that the square root of any number squared is going to equal the absolute value of that number. And recall what we already know, the absolute value of a number equals plus or minus the number. So we're going to use these ideas together, and this is where we're going with it. Let's say we have x minus 3 squared. There's my square. And this is going to be an equation that I need to solve. First off, I know that I do not change the equation if I take the square root of both sides. So if you take this positive square root of both sides, then this becomes, according to the rule above, x minus 3, the absolute value. Okay. And the square root of 5 is, or 25, is always the positive, so that would be 5. But we know that taking the square root of a number is the same as saying the plus or minus. Add my 3 to both sides and find my two values. 3 plus 5 is 8, and 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Let's go ahead and look at another example. Okay, solving this one. Again, when I have something squared, I could take the square root of both sides. So this would be like taking the square root of that. Equals the square root of that. Okay, so now the next phase is to take the square root of a square, something squared. We change that into the absolute value, 0.3x plus 1.9. Taking the square root on a well, we'll just go ahead and keep it like that. Okay, now absolute value changes the right side to remove the absolute value signs by. Okay, so we'll just go ahead as we remove that absolute value sign. We're just going to go ahead and keep this plus or minus the square root of 28.7. Since you've learned to do this efficiently on the calculator, we'll keep this to the very last step, which would be much more typical of how it would be done in real life work there. So we're going to subtract or take the 1.9 to the other side. 0.3x equals negative 1.9 plus or minus the square root of 28.7. That's an 8. And then we're going to divide by 0.3, we're multiplying right now, so we'll go negative 1.9 plus or minus the square root of 28.7 all over 0.3. Now at this point you would take out your calculator and you would crunch that out, and you should get numbers that are approximately 11.52 and negative 24.19. So go ahead and crunch that out and check yourself there. Okay, well, let's do one more example here. Anytime we have something squared equals something, we can take the square root of both sides. So we're going to take the square root of 2x plus 7, the whole thing squared, equals the square root of negative 64. And notice what we have here is a problem, because we can't take the square root of a negative number. So now my solution would be the null set. There are no proper solutions for that. Okay, for your homework on this section, what I've asked you to do is go ahead and do the oral practice, writing the answers out, A through K odd. Let me just show you what they're asking for here. Very straightforward. They just want you to change that first step. So if you're given x plus 5 squared equals 81, they just want you to have lots of practice with this. We're going to take the square root of both sides. I'm sorry, they don't want you to do that. You are going to take the square root of both sides, but go ahead and write the second step, which is when that square root converts to an absolute value equals the square root of 81 or 9. Again, since I was off to a rocky start there, figuring out what they were expecting of me here, we're going to take the absolute value, because I'm taking the square root of both sides, so we're going to do this in one step rather than two, and the square root of 34. Again, I'm going to do B. Those are my examples. X minus 3 squared, the second step that I would be given, equals 64. If I move this in one step down 2 steps of what I illustrated before, I get the absolute value of x minus 3. The square root of 64 is 8. And so that's how you'll be doing those. Go ahead and work through just the left-hand column, just so that that becomes embedded in your mind. And then for your problems, you'll be doing 1 through 39 odd. For the next section, then, we're going to be looking at things that have a trinomial in them. Okay, so as we're doing now the trinomials, let's look at this one more time, because I'm not sure when I stopped my taping. I apologize for that. What we've got here is we've got a perfect square trinomial on the left side, so we're going to convert that, and then from here down it looks just exactly like it did in the last lesson. When you're looking at your oral practice problems, all they want you to do is this first step, converting the perfect square trinomial, if it works, I'm not sure they all do, to an expression squared equals 4. And so they just want, there's an example on B again. So that's all they're looking for in the oral practice. And then, of course, they give you the directions for the problem set. Go ahead and try all the way through 49. If you have trouble on any of them, obviously, or especially on 49, we can talk about that in class. Okay. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you on Wednesday.